We have a deepening system that will be developing out in the Intermountain West. It's going to be pulling plenty of moisture out ahead of it. And so we're going to be looking for several chances of showers and thunderstorms by midweek and continuing on into the weekend. And we're talking about the type of moisture that could bring 1 to even more than 2 inches of rain across the region throughout the week. And this week could also bring us some above average high temperatures, which when you put it all together could bring us some strong to maybe even severe thunderstorms by Thursday or Friday. Hello everyone, I'm meteorologist Brad Werner for Region Weather Live, your YouTube source for weather across the Dakotas and Minnesota. And yes, folks, we're going to be having a big deepening system out in the Intermountain West that's eventually going to be bringing some moisture out ahead of it. But before it does so, it's going to be bringing some ridging out ahead of it as well. And that's going to be allowing some above average temperatures into our region as well. Now, while Tuesday could bring some spotty showers here and there, really we're not expecting much of anything until more so later in the day on Wednesday. And probably the better chances are going to be within this region roughly. Now, even there on Wednesday, we're not looking at a great chance for any widespread activity, but just some scattered showers and thunderstorms. Now, ultimately, by Wednesday evening, we really don't have a lot of strong winds. Most of it is still out in the west or even to the north of us. So that area that kind of outlined in there, not a whole lot of wind, not much to go off of, so really not expecting much in the way of severe weather going into Wednesday. Now, by Thursday morning, we're looking for that activity to start to increase just a little bit more, particularly across North Dakota, possibly even parts of northern Minnesota as well. You might have some scattered activity across eastern South Dakota, but ultimately, it's going to be the north where we're going to be starting the day on Thursday that has the best chance of showers and thunderstorms, and it looks like that activity really is going to ramp up as we get a little bit later into the afternoon. And again, kind of that best chance is going to be across the north and then across South Dakota. Maybe the one drier area looking in for Thursday is probably going to be southern Minnesota. For now, most of the stuff is expected to remain scattered, but there's a little bit of discrepancy in some of the models. We're looking at the European model, and we can see still not a whole lot of wind pushing into this region just yet. And ultimately, you need that wind to really drive some of those storm activity. But when we look at the GFS, the American model has just a little bit more wind in there, just a little more of a disturbance that starts to run through South Dakota. So if that comes to fruition, we might see a little more storminess down across south central, southeastern parts of South Dakota Thursday, to where maybe some of those storms could be strong to even severe. So that's something we're going to have to start watching out for into South Dakota for Thursday. In fact, if we take a look at the GFS model at the surface, we can see how it wants to develop these big, massive thunderstorms across South Dakota going into Thursday evening and just slowly track it to the south and maybe a little more southeasterly throughout the night. Now, as for now, I think that model is still the outlier, but it bears some watching. We'll have to keep an eye just to see if maybe some of the models trend that way as far as Thursday night goes for South Dakota. I think generally we're looking at just some scattered showers and storms across the region, but we'll keep an eye on that area for South Dakota on Thursday. Now, by Friday and into Saturday, as evidenced by the dew points here, that's really when a lot of that moisture starts to really get pulled into the region, especially across eastern parts of the Dakotas and in across Minnesota. This is really the time frame where a lot of that rainy activity is really going to ramp up. And of course, not surprisingly, that's really when that system begins to eject out of the Rockies. We begin to see those stronger winds now pushing into South Dakota and Minnesota going into Friday and Friday night. And then as we get into Saturday, actually, we're probably looking at so much moisture and so much instability. That's probably just going to be a lot of rain for Saturday and not so much concern for severe weather. And so you can see here on Friday how the model begins to just develop more and more rain, particularly across, a good chunk of central and eastern North Dakota, across much of South Dakota, and then across western parts of Minnesota as we get to later into the day on Friday. Now, again, we've got that chance, a little better chance for Friday for severe weather, particularly across southeast and south central parts of South Dakota going into later Friday evening and then going into the overnight, pushing into southeastern parts or southwestern parts of Minnesota through the overnight hours. So I think if anything, as far as our better chances go, when we're looking for that potential for severe weather, I think Friday afternoon into Friday night's probably the best chance. So again, by that point at the mid-levels, we really begin to have those stronger winds pushing into that part of our area, that eastern South Dakota, southwest Minnesota. And so the possibility of some large hail and some damaging winds is going to be a possibility, obviously, as we go into Friday night. Now, as I said, for Saturday, we're going to have so much moisture, I think, wrapped up and really just ultimately sucked into this thing, that there's just going to be a lot of cloudiness in the area. And of course, that's going to hamper the ability for the temperatures to rise up and get warmer. And if we can't get real warm, we're not going to have much in the way of severe weather. But with that said, we're probably going to be seeing some pretty good widespread rain, some thunderstorms throughout the day on Saturday, particularly across Minnesota and in some of these areas that really need it, up in that east central northeastern parts of Minnesota, kind of in that Hinckley area. And look at this, what this model wants to do. It wants to wrap this system up and just continue to bring rain into Sunday as well, by the time or before it kind of dumbbells out and eventually moves out of our area. Now look at the potential rainfall that the Weather Service models basically have put out there. This is going through this week, in through the weekend, and basically right into Monday, where we've got, look at this amount of rain, 2, maybe 3 inches across eastern parts of South Dakota, southeast North Dakota, across portions of Minnesota as well. I think some of this actually might shift just a little bit. We might see some of the stronger or the heavier stuff maybe just kind of shift a little bit into north central, maybe northeastern parts of Minnesota. We'll see, but just depending on how some of these storms actually develop, some of these areas up and through here, I think, have the potential for seeing a little bit more. But man, some widespread rains in some areas that really need it, obviously. Now, the bad thing is we're in the middle of harvest for a lot of you. Do you want rain? Well, some of you obviously could use it, as I said, but you're probably wishing it would maybe wait until October more so. But unfortunately, boy, it looks like we're really going to have a wet pattern throughout the week. Now, one other thing to maybe take a note of is, just because this system is so potent and wrapped up, that we're probably going to be seeing some wind gusts associated with it. Now, Tuesday, we can see as we get a little bit later in the afternoon, more so across western parts of North Dakota, dies off through the overnight hours. Wednesday, not too bad, but I think more so as we get into Thursday and Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening, those wind gusts start to ramp up across South Dakota. And then as we get into Friday, those winds really begin to shift and occur more across Minnesota, as we're seeing 35, maybe even 40 miles per hour. And then as we get into Saturday, look at that. A good chunk of South Dakota, North Dakota, most of Minnesota, we're going to be seeing wind gusts 35, 40, maybe even 45 miles per hour. So ultimately, Saturday, especially across Minnesota, is going to be wet. It's going to be windy. Really not going to be a great day on Saturday. And then Sunday, as that system kind of dumbbells around, if that indeed is what's going to happen, you can expect some more windiness across the northern parts of our region. All right, high temperatures going through the week for Tuesday. Look at this, 90s across a good chunk of our area. On the bookends, we've got the high temperatures in the 70s on either side to maybe mid 60s, of course, up in the Arrowhead region. Wednesday, we're looking at those highs in the 80s to around 90, mainly across the south. And we're looking at highs around 70 to the upper 70s in the north. Thursday, we're going to hang on to those 80s just a little bit longer across the south, and again 70s in the north with maybe some upper 60s as well. Friday, as that system begins to draw in some cold air on the backside of this, we're only looking at high temperatures in the 60s for most of the region. The only exception is going to be for Friday down in the southeast here, where we're looking at highs in the 70s. Saturday, a little more of the same, mid 60s to mid 70s generally. And Sunday, about the same, mid 60s to mid 70s for your highs. So quite an active 5 or 6 days here coming up. So we're going to have the live stream up more than likely starting Wednesday and continuing on into Thursday, Friday. Possibly we'll even leave it up for Saturday just to kind of continue tracking all the rainy activity that's expected to occur. Now, along with that, just remember, if some of these storms really develop and continue over one area, man, we're going to also have the potential for some localized flooding. It just depends if this thing really really sets up in some regions. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind as well. We've got that little bit of threat of severe weather, but let's just think about that potential for flooding in some areas as well. Just depends on how really well organized some of this can get going. So always a threat and something we'll have to watch as well. So as I said, we'll have the live stream up Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for sure. So make sure if you haven't done so already, hit the little subscribe button down below and also hit the bell button right beside it. That way you're notified when I am on live and when I've uploaded a video just like this, so that you can keep track of the latest across the Dakotas and Minnesota. At the very least, just hit the thumbs up button, hit the like button as well. That helps this channel get notified or get noticed by other people, and hopefully we can get more and more people noticing this channel. That would be great. All right, everybody, for Region Weather Live, I'm meteorologist Brad Warner, and everybody have a good day.